Star Wars Starfighter was released on February 20th of 2001. That makes it one of the earliest PlayStation 2 games, being released only 3 months after the console was released. It certainly feels like an early launch game. It's super buggy and looks like garbage. I was only able to play the first 2 levels of this game because of a game-breaking glitch. The game's plot takes place during the first movie right before the battle for Naboo, which means I couldn't care less about the plot. I like Star Wars, but I think we can all agree the prequels are just garbage. The gameplay has you flying around in a Naboo fighter. Unfortunately, it's not a track shooter like Star Fox. Instead, you have the ability to move around in a fully 3D plane. The starship you're in handles okay. You can rotate it with the left stick and do loops in it. One of the biggest problems arises when you fly too high, though. The game features tons of invisible walls. If they didn't want you to fly that high, then why not put you in a tunnel instead of outdoors with invisible walls? The second you hit an invisible wall, it'll rocket your ship in a random direction, usually forcing you to bump into something. If you bump into any surface, your starship will pinball around like crazy, bouncing off of every surface until you can get control of it, which is easier said than done. To add to this problem, the camera goes haywire for a second after collisions, and you can't see what's going on in order to correct yourself from hitting another wall or object. The voice acting in this game is incredibly bad and doesn't resemble the tone of the Star Wars movies at all, especially with your character's voice. It's overly cartoony and often hurts to hear. This isn't a Troy Baker joint, that's for sure. Now let me talk about the glitch I encountered. After playing the second level on normal, I was doing awful, so I decided to change the difficulty level to easy. After dying once on the tutorial level after hitting a wall and bouncing around to my death, I respawned and for some reason all the voice acting stopped. However, I could still do the mission objectives. It's not that big of a loss, but it gets worse. Once you get to the last part of the tutorial mission, the final step is to get the shields down to the girl teaching you. I kept flying around shooting her, but without the voice cue, the game never moves on to the last part of the level, so you're just stuck flying in circles in this area. I killed myself a few times and it didn't fix the problem. I even tried restarting the mission several times and it didn't help either. I also encountered a third glitch when I paused the game while stuck on the tutorial. It just froze the game. To make matters worse, this game also completely lacks any type of checkpoints, so when you die you have to go through the entire painful tutorial over and over and over again. The tutorial itself is actually quite bad. It has you doing your abilities that you'll be using for the rest of the game, but there's one big problem. It never actually tells you what button does what, just what to do. So you're sitting there telling me I can change between primary targets? That's cool, I'd like to know what button actually does that though. The second level's graphics are horrible. The space environment isn't too bad, but when you're fighting enemies you'll have a hard time figuring out where they actually are, because they're a darker silver and they blend in with the black space background far too easily. And when you're far away you can barely see them, it just looks like a lump of pixels that may or may not be a star. There's no mini-map, but there's an arrow that directs you to the ship that you're supposed to be protecting, which is pretty much useless. In the tutorial they say you can lock onto enemy ships, which would be helpful on this level, but they never told me what button to press to do it. Graphically, this game pretty much looks like it's at the start of the 6th generation of video game consoles. The textures are incredibly low resolution, and everything looks bland and boring. The hardware this was made for was super new at the time, so I'm not too surprised that it looks really poor for the PlayStation 2. The music in this game is just what you'd expect. It has symphonic Star Wars music, like in the movies. Most of the music seems to be taken directly from Episode 1. Thanks to the game-breaking glitch, I didn't see much of the game, but I don't really feel like I'm missing anything. The game feels super glitchy, and even when it's working, it feels awful, with plenty of invisible walls and horrible handling if you hit anything. After the short experience I had with this game, I have no interest in playing it any further.